to the Advanced Theme Development class. This is meant to be a continuation of the theme development class that we had on Tuesday. So while all these all the topics are useful for anyone who's building a concrete5 site, we're going to be using the specific theme that we were working on before. So, but I'll try and help people get up to speed if they have any questions. So right here is my concrete5 site. This is I took a blank concrete5 site, and in the basic theme development training, I applied a custom theme to it, and that theme is called the darkness theme. And if I open it up here in a browser, you can see some of how it is meant to look. And as you can see in our example, we got it looking pretty good here. If I put the page in edit mode, you can see how some of this is built. There we go. You can see here, this is the home page type with some featured content over here and some blocks here. And these are all content blocks with specially crafted HTML and links that link into stories. And the first thing that I want to do in this training is I want to change how we approach these blocks. So if you were around for the last training, you'll notice like we were able to get these things working pretty well, but it's kind of difficult when you're working with custom classes and HTML. It's kind of difficult to work with the content block. So if I open this up, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So these special links down here that are continue reading, they have the box around them. They have to have a class named read more, and then you know, these have to be paragraphs, and then the image is actually not supposed to have a paragraph in front of it. I'm not sure if it matters or not. Basically, and then you have to have H2s in there. Basically, it's kind of a pain to make something like this work because, you know, one false move, if TinyMC will sometimes remove styles, and so one false move, you might, lose a style, from here to there, and not know what it is to get it back. And TinyMC, our content block in general, is good for sort of free-form content. But if you have something a little more structured that you really and design centric, you're going to want to perhaps approach it in a different way. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to actually, instead of using content blocks for this, I'm going to change this out into a new block type that I will make right here, and we can see how easy it is to create a new block type for something a bit more design centric like this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to head to the concrete5 marketplace, and I'm going to download the designer content add-on. This is free add-on. It's made primarily for designers and developers. It's a tool to use it's a good starting point for blocks. So I will download this. Then I will, if you connect your site to the community, obviously you can download it right from within your site. But since this is a free add-on, you can also download it right from the website and place it in the packages directory. And then head into install add-ons. And you'll see the designer content block is awaiting approval or awaiting installation. We'll install that. And then it adds this menu option under stacks and blocks. So what this tool does is it actually lets you streamline the block creation process. So blocks are really, really easy to make, but you still do have to, code up a few things. This actually will shortcut that process and let you, and it will code the block up for you, and then you can reuse it as you see fit. So what I'm going to do, if I look at my home page, I'm going to call this block the home featured story block because I want to use it on the home page primarily, and it's meant to show featured stories. So I give my block the handle home featured story. I'll give it the name home featured story. I have to make my blocks directory writable. That's what this big red message is about. And now now what we do is we add the fields that this block keeps track of. So let's take a look at what this block has. Each of these block instances has a headline, story 1, story 2, story 3. So I'm going to add a text box, and we'll call it headline. We'll say that it is required. Then we have an image. We'll call that image. You can even keep it to a particular proportion, which is nice. And heck, I'll just make it use the, I haven't actually used this feature of the designer content block, but since it is 300 by 150, that is what I will force it to be. And then we have a description, so we'll call that a text area. Actually, we'll call that a WYSIWYG editor. And then finally, we have a link to a page. Next, we head to save the block. Oh no. Am I really going to have to... I should have started this before. Okay, well, we'll do that all again. Make sure you make your directory writable before you start using this tool. And we'll keep going with that. Okay. Text box, headline, image, page link. We'll make the block. And now if we head into the block types section of our dashboard, you can actually see that there are custom block types installed, home featured story. This has actually created a block type in concrete5. So if we open up our web root, you can actually see there is a new block and all the files have actually been created. So it's a very powerful tool. So then if I come in to this page, I can delete this guy and I can add a new block. And now all of my fields are actually here in the block. So let's call this story 1. We'll choose the image that we had before. We'll copy out, actually I can't quite do that. This is the text for this block. And then we will select a page to link to, and I've already created these pages here. And we'll call this continue reading. So now when I add this content, you can see that, you know, it's amazingly enough, it actually looks pretty good because all the designer content block does by default is just take what you have it just takes what you have specified and spits it out in a row, basically. But so that's when we come in to our blocks view layer, and we open this up in our text editor, and we customize it for the actual output that we want. So let's do that. So what we will do here then is go to the desktop, into the theme that we had, open up that HTML, and get a copy of the HTML that is expected to be used here. So the first thing here is there's an H2 around the first field text box. Then there is a div called image holder around the image. Yet another reason why this is nice. We didn't even have that div in our other example. Then there's just paragraph tags, which should be taken care of by the editor. And finally, another paragraph named read more down here. And we just look for the fields that the designer content block has created for us. And I'll refresh this page, and you can see right there we have just a perfect example of how this works. But if we go in here to edit this, it's quite simple. But if we try and edit this in here, it's much more prone to breaking. So I can delete both of these and start again with the home featured story block. Oops. Probably need to give this a link text, huh? So now it's much easier. It's much easier for us to actually take that template and make it something that we can manipulate. It's just a lot simpler. Anybody have any questions about that right off the bat? Matt asks, you can just drop that custom block into a package with a new theme, right? I don't quite... Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, the blocks are created without any kind of dependency on the designer content package. Yeah, it makes them completely standalone creations. We can actually step through some of the content that they... Whoops. Some of the so this is the code for the controller that the designer content block creates. It's actually fairly impressive because it duplicates all the functionality of the of the content block if you include a WYSIWYG field in there, and that's fairly impressive because there's a lot of functionality in that. Yeah, so even if you use the designer content block as a as a starting point for blocks. You know, even if you decide later on that you want to change the field names so that they're not just field 1 text box, etc., so that they're actually, you know, they actually make sense to someone reading the code. It's a really, really handy way. I mean, we just swap that content out. We just swap that content out, you know, inside of 15 minutes, as opposed to, you know, even for someone experienced in making blocks, there's still a fair amount that you have to do. I would definitely encourage people to understand how blocks work, but you know, at a deeper level. But the designer content block is a really, really nice tool for designers and developers. So that is one particular way that we could make this work. And then, of course, as we add new content to the site, we move these blocks around and change that. That is definitely a way that it can work. Unfortunately, that isn't necessarily. I mean, that isn't always the way that we recommend approaching your site. So, for example, if we look at this, the way I've sort of approached this. I've called these stories, story 1, story 2, story 3. If this really were a magazine or a news site and these stories changed, you know, every couple of days or every day or whatever, this would not be the best way to handle this. It's a very, very flexible way, and it's a good way to think about it if these are bits of content that don't change that much. But if you're actually constantly changing this and adding new content to your site, it might not be in your best interest to always have to change the homepage. For one reason, one reason it's tedious. You have to actually, every time you add a new story, you have to link to it on the homepage, and you probably have to reshuffle these and remove the old ones. So it's extra work. And moreover, you can kind of see in just the last 2 trainings, I've already created 17 or 18 versions of this page, just as I've gone through and started, swapped out this content. You know, if you change this every day, we've actually had people who use this approach, and you know, by year 2 of using their concrete5 site, they probably have 1,000 or so versions of a page of the homepage, and we had to actually integrate a remove old versions script. So, because those pages sometimes get a little bit slow when you have 1,000 versions of them, as you might imagine. So, if that were the way that you were going to handle this, I might suggest a different tack. And so, I'm going to work on right now on reworking the way the homepage template works for a more dynamic experience. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete these. Then I'm going to go into the homepage template and find the home 1 column, home 2 column 2, home column 3, and then I'm going to delete that entirely, and I'm going to create a new area called home featured articles. So now if I refresh, you can see those 3 areas are gone and 1 large area remains. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my site up so that instead of me having to manually set all that content every time, I'm going to set it up so that it automatically pulls links to story 1, story 2, story 3, to all the most recent content under my about section. So obviously this might not be named about, this might be named magazine or posts or entries or blog or whatever, but the principle is the same. Moreover, I'm going to set it up so that it always shows the most recent stuff first, and it only shows items that you deem featured, because that's the homepage featured content. So the first thing I'm going to do for that is I need to create a page attribute. I need to create a checkbox attribute. If you haven't played with attributes yet, they are ways to extend the pages, files, and users in your system to sort of track more information than we currently track by default. So you can see some of the built-in attributes that we have. I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to call it, actually I've forgotten what I'm going to call it. the page list block, which we are going to use for this, uses an attribute named isFeatured, but it doesn't install it by default. So we're going to install it. I'll add this. And now I'm able to add a checkbox to every page on my site. Custom Attributes tab. You can see Featured Page at the bottom here. And so I'm going to set up this page as featured. Now, granted, that doesn't do anything right now because I haven't actually, I'm not using that attribute in any way. They don't. Some attributes are used by the core right from the get-go, like the exclude from nav attribute is used by the auto nav, and exclude from page list is used by the page list. But generally, those only work because those templates are coded to use them. So if you use these attributes, you're going to be writing a bit of code generally to make use of them. But the page list is set up to use them, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put this page in edit mode, and I'm going to add a block called page list. So what we're going to want to do is, since obviously this section of the site is optimally suited to show 3 pages, we're going to say display 3 pages of type. And we don't really care what the page type is, so we're going to say all pages. But we are going to say featured pages only. Since there aren't going to be any aliases underneath the About section, I'm going to get rid of that option because it can make my site faster if I don't need it. I don't want any pagination. And finally, I need to tell it where to pull my pages from. And I'm going to say underneath the About page. I don't need to include all child pages, and I want to sort them by most recent first so that it shows the most recent pages first. I don't need an RSS feed, and I don't really need to truncate the descriptions, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'll add this, and as you can see, if I publish my page here, it is pulling story 1 because story 1 is the page in my site underneath About that is set as featured. So if I add the others as featured, it will add them to this block. In theory, there we go. And you can also see it is pulling them in, I think that should be reverse chronological order. Let's take a look and make sure that that is right. Story 3, 1, and 2. Let's make sure story 1 is old. Story 2 is here. Just so that we get a sensible listing. Three, two, one. Okay, so as you can see, we have dynamic content coming in, and anytime you add new content to this, it's going to dynamically update this list. Unfortunately, the list doesn't look right at all. If we look here in the HTML, this is the page list. This is the HTML that the page list outputs. It's nice and semantic. It's easy to theme if you know what you're doing, but it's not really what our template needs right now. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a custom template for this. Custom templates are very powerful tools. They let you create different view layers for blocks that if you upgrade your concrete5 site, your own customizations will stay. Plus, they let you upgrade the view without touching any of the other code. So to make a custom template for the page list block, we figure out what the name of our blocks, this works for all blocks too, by the way. We figure out what the name of our directory is, and that's page list. So we go out to the almost empty blocks directory and we create a page list directory. We keep it empty except we add a templates subfolder. And then we start from a good starting point. So we come into the concrete blocks page list directory and we grab view.php, which is the file that typically renders the view for the page list block. Then we come back to page list, go into templates. We figure out a name for our custom template. We're going to call it Home Featured Stories. So we create a folder there named Home Featured Stories, and then we paste view.php into it. Then we open this up and we check out our various options. We know that Home Featured Story, so this is now something we can completely customize. And you'll notice it's nicely semantically separated. This is actually a much messier template, but then some core team members cleaned it up for us, and or some community members cleaned it up for us. I think it's actually the same person who made the designer content block. So nice work, Jordan. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove bits of this that we don't need, because this is totally custom to the home page. So we're going to remove that. We're going to remove the RSS icon because it's, again, something we don't need. And then we are going to change out the content that we have here with how we want this to, how the template expects it to look. So at the beginning, we want to make sure that there is an unordered list, because that's how this section starts. Remember, it's going to be everything inside intro here. And then for every page in the list, we want a list element. Then we want the page title as an H2. So we're going to actually change this, move it up here as an H2. We don't need to give it a class name. And we don't need it to have a link either, because the link happens at the bottom. Then we actually have an image here, but we don't actually, there's no way of getting an image from this stuff. There's no image stuff up here. We'll come back to that in a second. There's actually some very useful commenting up here that will give that away, but I will show it to you as well. So we'll come back to that. We're going to skip the image holder for a second. Instead, we're just going to put in the div, even though it's empty. And then we'll put in the short description of the page. That is, again, the description that you have access to when you're adding the new page. And then finally, we will add in the read more link. And the URL is set up here. And again, since this is a custom template, we can just say continue reading. We don't have to worry about specifying that. So now that looks pretty close, except for the image, which we'll come back to. If I refresh this page, obviously it still looks the same because I haven't applied my custom template yet. So I come down here, I click on this block, and I click custom templates. You'll see I have a few already. Blog index and blog index thumbnail are custom templates for the page list that come in the core. Other packages and things like that can add custom templates to the page list as well. But we also have home featured stories, which is what I just added. If I save that, you'll see that it looks a lot closer. And I'll publish that, and we'll see what's going on with this. Why is this looking weird? This is part of the fun of troubleshooting. Interesting. Looks like the final element in my list has to have a class of last. If I were a betting person, I would say that meant that last item has less padding on it than the others. So how are we going to deal with this? Well, we know that this particular list can only have 3 items in it. This is a custom template. We can get very specific, which is nice. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to count. I'm going to start with 0, and every time the pages increase, I'm going to increase this. So that means on the first element, this is going to be 1 down here, second one 2, third one 3. So what I'm going to say here is if I equals 3, class equals last. And we will refresh this page, and it looks a lot better. Whew. So now this is cool. If I come to story 2, and I come up to the properties section, and I say this is a story about something great, and change that description, and then I come back to the home page, you can see that this is working there. Now, it looks like this template really wants me to wrap these in p tags. So that could potentially be a problem. Well, I see. So what we're going to really want to do is we're going to want to come back here, and we're going to want to make sure that the description is wrapped in a paragraph. That helps that a lot. So again, I can change the target page, and the home page content completely changes.